Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. I said, "Sit down, soldier." The judge didn't yell, but his voice cut like steel. Jenna's lawyer, Dean Weston, gave a smirk that made my jaw clench. Jenna herself? She chuckled, loud enough for the courtroom to hear. That laugh. It wasn't just dismissive, it was deliberate. The same kind of laugh I'd heard from Taliban fighters on intercepted comms, mocking us before ambushes. Except this one hurt more. I stayed standing. My palms were sweating against my thighs. Not because I was nervous, but because I knew if I sat now, I'd never stand tall in this courtroom again. "I'm not here as a soldier," I said, locking eyes with the judge. "I'm here as a father." His gavel hit the wood. "This isn't a war zone, Lieutenant Colonel. In this courtroom, you follow my orders." The air in the room changed. No one else noticed, but I did. Dean leaned back, casual. Jenna's eyes flicked to my son, Darren, sitting quietly behind me. 14 years old, trying to act like none of this mattered, but I saw his fingers tighten around the notebook in his lap. That's when I decided. They could question my rank, my service, even my sanity, but they would not question my right to be a father. And they sure as hell wouldn't humiliate me in front of my son. I sat, but not in surrender. In strategy. Let them think I was just another broken veteran. They didn't know the war they'd just started. Before we move ahead, I just want to say, your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now, be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference. Let's continue the story. They don't see you when you come home. Not really. They see the flag on the porch, the handshake at the gas station, the polite nod at the grocery store. Thank you for your service. Then they move on. What they don't see are the nights. The kind where every creak in the hallway sounds like a mind trigger. The dreams where your buddy's scream follows you through smoke you can't wake from. But I managed. I lived with it. I didn't just survive war. I learned how to compartmentalize it. I buried the fire and raised a son. I coached Little League. I ran a veteran-owned construction business that paid fair wages and treated people like humans. I showed up to PDA meetings and pressed shirts. Never missed a school concert. That version of me? Jenna didn't want it. Said I was too intense. Said I'd never left the war. Maybe she was right. But I left her the house, the SUV, the fancy blender she never used. I just wanted peace. And Darren. Our arrangement worked. Alternating weeks. Handoffs at the local diner. Civil, if not warm. Then Dean Weston came into the picture. He looked at me like I was a utility shed he'd tear down and replace with granite countertops. Wore tailored suits to kid drop-offs. Called me Colonel, with that smirk that always said, "You're playing soldier while I run the world." Now he's trying to take my son. No. Our son. You can take the uniform off a man, but you can't take the mission out of him. Let's keep this civil, Marcus. She said it over cappuccino. I hadn't even taken a sip yet. Jenna sat across from me, flawless as always. Not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle on her silk blouse. Dean stood behind her like a bodyguard, but not speaking, just watching. Always watching. "I thought we agreed," I said. 50-50 custody. It's been working. She tilted her head. It was until Darren started coming home with nightmares. I blinked. He's 14. Kids have nightmares. "He says you yell in your sleep," she replied, voice suddenly motherly and soft. "He says you sleep with a knife next to your bed." My stomach turned. That knife had saved my life once. I kept it because I felt safe. And Darren had never said a word. "Are you?" I paused. "Are you saying I'm dangerous?" Dean stepped in now, laying a thin folder on the table. "We're saying the court should evaluate whether your environment is psychologically appropriate for a developing adolescent." I didn't touch the folder. I knew that trick. Let the soldier open the bomb. "This is war for you, isn't it?" I asked, looking straight into Jenna's eyes. Not about Darren. About winning. She flinched, but only for a second. Dean smiled. "We'll see you in court, Colonel." I walked out without finishing my coffee. In the parking lot, I sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. If they wanted war, I'd give them one. And this time, I wasn't fighting in the desert. I was fighting for my son. The hallway outside Darren's school smelled like sweat and cheap disinfectant. Kids laughed behind closed doors. Lockers clanged. The bell hadn't rung yet. I stood there, waiting. Darren finally appeared, hoodie half-zipped, earbuds in. He spotted me, smiled, then hesitated. That half-step of uncertainty hit harder than any mortar round. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, handing him the protein bar I always brought. He took it, nodded. "Yeah, just tired." We walked toward the parking lot in silence, the rhythm of our footsteps uneven. I watched him, shoulders hunched more than usual, eyes darting to his phone. "You and Mom say stuff about me in court?" he asked suddenly, not looking at me. I stopped walking. "What did she say to you?" He shrugged. "Just stuff. That you get weird at night. That you sleep with a weapon." I clenched my jaw. "Do you feel unsafe with me?" "No," he said, too fast. Then again, softer. "No. Never. But you're confused." He nodded. We reached the truck. I opened the door for him, watched him climb in like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Once I sat behind the wheel, I didn't start it. "I won't lie to you," I said. "Yes, I've seen things. Done things. That doesn't make me dangerous. It makes me careful. You're the most important thing in my life, Darren. That's why I keep the blade. That's why I lock the doors 3 times. That's why I check the cameras at night." He turned to me. His eyes were his mother's, sharp, assessing, but they held none of her coldness. "I know, Dad." Then he did something that wrecked me. He reached out and grabbed my hand. Squeezed it. "I told Mom you're the safest person I know." I turned the key in the ignition. They were trying to take this boy from me. Twist him. Reprogram him. Over my dead body. I need more than sympathy, Helen. I need strategy. My lawyer, Helen Ortiz, sat across from me at her conference table, glasses perched low, expression sharp. "You're facing a judge who owes Dean Weston favors from 3 past cases. That psych eval they filed. It's garbage, but it looks legit. Jen is smart. She's making it personal without appearing malicious." She slid a folder toward me. "They're setting a trap. You overreact, raise your voice, even flinch the wrong way. They'll spin it as aggression." I took a breath. Counted. Like I used to before breaching a door overseas. "They're playing politics. I know how to win a fight, Helen. But this..." I looked at the ceiling, exhaled. "This isn't a fight. It's an ambush." Helen leaned in. Then we counter-ambush. Quietly. No sudden moves. No courtroom heroics. Let them think they're ahead. I'm not a damn fool. No, you're a soldier. But in this arena, medals don't matter. Paperwork does. She opened a folder. "We'll subpoena their evaluator. Push for a second opinion. Start a forensic dive on any connections between Dean and the judge." You said Dean came out of nowhere. About a year after the divorce. Then we follow the paper trail. Everything leaves a footprint. Emails, texts, billing logs. If he's cooked anything, I'll find it. I looked at her, saw something hard in her eyes. "You believe me? I've seen your record. You're cleaner than half the bar association. And you've got one thing they don't." "What?" She smiled faintly. "You're not pretending." She stood, gathered her papers. "But Marcus, we don't swing until we're close enough to hit the heart." "Understood." I nodded. "Then start playing dumb. Be quiet. Be polite. And let me do what I do." As I left her office, I felt the shift. I wasn't just fighting for Darren anymore. Now I was hunting. The next time I saw Dean, he was laughing. Downtown, Courthouse Plaza. He stood in his tailored navy suit, hair slicked like a movie villain, laughing over cappuccino with 2 other lawyers. I stood across the street, watching from behind a parked sedan. He never once looked nervous. That told me something. He thought he'd already won. I crossed the street, slow and deliberate. Let my boots echo on the concrete. The kind of footsteps that announce a man who doesn't bluff. Dean turned just as I reached them. Well, if it isn't the colonel, he said with a shit-eating grin. Didn't recognize you without your gear and sand goggles. One of his friends chuckled. I didn't break eye contact. Funny, I said. You laugh a lot for someone clinging to a lie. Dean took a sip, unbothered. No lies, Marcus. Just narratives. And mine's cleaner. Less volatile. You think courtrooms are safe spaces? I asked. You've never seen a man bleed out on the floor while calling for his son. He paused. That grin flickered, only for a second. You know what your problem is? He said, stepping closer. You think war stories are enough to make you a hero. But this isn't Iraq. This is family court. And here, it's about influence, not honor. He leaned in, lowered his voice. You lost her. You're losing your son. You're just too proud to see it. I smiled now, just slightly. You keep talking like you've already won. That's usually when the ground gives out. He chuckled again, but his eyes twitched. I walked away without another word, because soon I'd be standing over the smoking crater he never saw coming. The last time I wore my dress blues was at Sergeant Raymond Rowe's funeral. He died saving a medic during an ambush in Kandahar. They gave me his flag because I was the one who sent him into that alley. I ironed my uniform 3 times that morning, folded the cuffs, polished the buttons, showed up, spoke 5 words, and saluted his mother. I wore that same uniform to Darren's 6th grade career day. Principal didn't know what to say. Kids looked at me like I was Captain America. But Jenna? She rolled her eyes and whispered to Dean, who just laughed. Later, Darren told me, Mom said being a soldier isn't a real job. I didn't say anything then. I just smiled, let it pass. But it stuck. People like Dean and Jenna, they don't understand weight. The weight of lives, the weight of silence, the weight of responsibility that doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. They think medals are costume jewelry and that standing straight means you're arrogant. At court last week, I saw that look again. The judge didn't see a man who spent 2 decades protecting freedom. He saw someone clinging to authority like a security blanket. A guy with too much discipline and not enough polish. But here's what they forget. I've operated under fire, led men through burning villages, and walked into rooms where everyone wanted me dead. This courtroom? This is child's play compared to that. Let them disrespect the uniform. Let them pretend suits mean power and rank means delusion. They're about to learn that some men don't need medals to win. They just need a reason. And my reason has my eyes, my last name, and calls me Dad. Judge Harlan Knox didn't flinch often. His gaze was practiced. Eyes that had seen 1,000 liars, thousands more truth twisters. But when I stood in front of him last week, I saw something else, something buried. Recognition. It was there, just for a second. He read the name Marcus Blackwell on the docket, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Barely. Like a reflex. Then it was gone, replaced with his usual polished stoicism. But I caught it. That twitch haunted me. Because I'd seen it before in a tent lit by one bare bulb, where Knox once sat in uniform, signing deployment reassessments. I remembered the smell of diesel, the sound of sand scraping metal. I remembered his voice. Blackwell, you're squared away. Solid leadership. Green light for redeployment. He signed that paper himself. And now, years later, he sat on a high bench, smirking down at me like I was some broken field case. Had he forgotten? Or was he hoping I had? Jenna's attorney rattled on about sleep patterns and emotional stability. Knox leaned forward slightly, chin resting on hand. I steady. But every time he looked at me, I saw it again. That glimmer. That flicker of familiarity he was trying so hard to bury. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was inconvenience. He didn't want this part of his past resurfacing. Didn't want a courtroom in suburban Virginia to be the stage for something he signed off on during wartime. And if I pushed too hard, too fast, he'd bury me under order and procedure. So I leaned back in my chair, stayed silent, let Dean gloat, let Jenna pretend to be the concerned mother. But inside, I was sharpening a memory. And soon, I'd make the judge remember exactly who he signed off on. The woman they brought in looked like a therapist from a made-for-TV movie. Warm sweater, notepad, a lanyard that said Dr. Marianne Clyburn, Ph.D. Jenna smiled when she took the stand. Dr. Clyburn, Dean began, smooth as ever. You assessed Mr. Blackwell at his ex-wife's request. What were your findings? She folded her hands. Mr. Blackwell exhibits signs consistent with unresolved combat-related PTSD. Night terrors, hypervigilance, distrust, hypervigilance. I muttered under my breath. And a strong preference for isolation, she continued. These traits, while not uncommon in veterans, raise concern when evaluating child-rearing environments. I sat still, jaw clenched. Helen leaned over. This was never disclosed to us. She's unlicensed in Virginia, I whispered. I've never met her. Dean beamed. Dr. Clyburn conducted a third-party review of Mr. Blackwell's behavior using observational reports from MS. Blackwell and her husband, as well as social media activity and video analysis. You mean my security camera footage? I said aloud. Mr. Blackwell, please don't interrupt, Knox warned. But I didn't care anymore. They'd crossed a line. You've never spoken to me, I said to Clyburn, eyes locked. Not once. You wrote a report based on someone else's version of me. I used professional standards, she replied, unfazed. You used hearsay and cherry-picked clips. The judge cleared his throat. We'll determine the admissibility of her report in due time. Yeah, I muttered. In due time. But that's when Helen slid a note to me. One sentence. She's not a licensed practitioner in Virginia, just in Arizona. And just like that, the ambush became ammunition. They wanted to make me look unstable? Fine. Then I'd show them what a stable man does when he's forced into a corner. And when I hit back, they wouldn't see it coming. The courtroom emptied like a slow drain. Lawyers whispered, files closed with soft clicks, and Jenna walked out with Dean, her hand wrapped around his arm like some twisted victory ribbon. I sat there. Still, that psych eval had shaken something. Not because it was true. It wasn't. But because it revealed how far they were willing to go. How deep they'd crawl. How much dirt they'd throw just to paint me as dangerous. I looked at the judge as he rose. He didn't glance at me once. No acknowledgement. No flicker of memory this time. Just a man leaving his bench like it wasn't soaked in betrayal. Helen leaned close. We'll challenge that eval and her license. We'll subpoena her credentials and move to strike the report. I didn't respond. My focus was on the image that kept looping in my head. Darren, sitting behind me, watching it all. Watching them call me broken. What if he started to believe it? What if they got to him, one story at a time, until all he remembered were the moments they weaponized? I stood and walked outside. Rain had started. Just a whisper of it. Enough to soak through the shirt, but not enough to matter. I didn't flinch. Helen caught up. Marcus, you okay? I've been blown up twice. Buried brothers. Carried a bleeding squad, mate for 3 miles under sniper fire. You think I'll break because of a woman in a cardigan and a courtroom snake in a tie? She smiled faintly. Didn't think so. I looked across the street. Dean was leaning into Jenna's car window, whispering something. He looked too sure of himself. Good. Let him feel safe. Let them both think they had me pinned. Because I've been in worse positions, with fewer resources, and still made it home. And this was just beginning. That night, I opened the metal case under my bed. No dust. I'd cleaned it every few months, even though I didn't touch what was inside. It was like muscle memory. Maintain your gear even if you don't deploy. Inside, a folded flag, 3 commendation bars, my deployment coin, and a black notebook. Not the kind you write stories in. The kind that saves lives. Inside it were names, numbers, call signs, protocols. I flipped pages until I found him. Colonel Preston Wraith Miller, retired, currently working with Veteran Affairs clearance and 2-star pull in federal networks. I texted, call sign Revenant, requesting check-in. Immediate. He replied within 7 minutes. Location secured. Initiate recon protocol. What's the mission? I paused, then typed. Enemy embedded in legal system. Need classified field report from Deployment 14A, signed by Jag H. Knox. Timeline, 2016. Mental eval file included. 5 dots danced. Then a single line came through, already pulling. Knox. That hypocrite's still breathing? This'll be fun. I stared at the screen. This wasn't about revenge. It was about proving I was never unstable. That a court questioning my fatherhood was contradicting the same institution that cleared me to lead soldiers into war. They wanted to play chess. But I'd been trained in war games they couldn't even imagine. 2 hours later, an encrypted file arrived. I opened it with trembling fingers. Page 1. Mental Stability Evaluation. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Blackwell. Final line of the assessment. Mentally resilient, emotionally sound. Command structure remains intact. Recommendation. Redeploy. Co-signed. Brigadier General Preston Miller / JAG Officer Harlan Knox. I stared at Knox's signature. He'd signed off on me being fit for combat, but now claimed I wasn't fit to parent my own son? That wouldn't just hurt his credibility. It would detonate it. 2 days later, I walked into Helen's office like I was back in Baghdad. Calm, steady, aware of every corner of the room. She looked up from her laptop. You get what I think you got? I dropped the printed file on her desk. When she flipped the cover page, her eyebrows lifted. Is this? Holy hell. She scanned the report, line by line. Her eyes widened at the bottom. That's his signature. Yep. And the general's? Double clearance. It's official. Fully authenticated. She exhaled. This isn't just a weapon. It's a grenade. They questioned my stability, I said. But this isn't a character witness. This is federal. Dated. Co-signed by the very man trying to bury me now. Helen leaned back, lips pursed. We don't show our hand yet, she said. Not until the moment matters most. Understood. She tapped her pen against the desk. We hit them with this during the custody cross. When Dean's painting you as dangerous and Knox tries to push back, we drop this. Publicly. No warning. I wanted to be in front of Darren, I said quietly. Helen looked up. I want my son to hear it. Hear a general and a judge call me stable. Competent. Capable. Because they've been whispering poison in his ears. Helen nodded slowly. We'll make that happen. As I left her office, a light rain tapped the window. Soft. Constant. The kind of rain that hides everything until it's too late to move. That's what this was now. A slow, silent advance. Let them build their walls higher. Let them believe they're untouchable. Because the foundation underneath them? It just started to crack. Court was back in session, but this time, I walked in with something stronger than defiance. Proof. Helen clutched the black folder under her arm like it contained state secrets, because in a way, it did. She knew the timing mattered more than anything. The moment we exposed the judge's own signature would define the outcome. Dean swaggered past me in the hallway, phone in hand, spouting some story about a recent win. I ignored him. He didn't matter today. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy. Jenna sat like a marble statue prim, emotionless. She was in full performance mode. Her eyes flicked to Darren, who sat near the back with the counselor the court appointed. He looked smaller today, drawn in. I wanted to walk over, say something. But this wasn't the moment for words. Helen began. We'd like to revisit the question of Mr. Blackwell's fitness as a parent, she said smoothly. Specifically, the claims regarding his mental state. Knox adjusted his robe slightly. Counselor, we've already heard expert testimony. That testimony was based on speculation. Helen interrupted, polite but sharp. We now have government documentation, classified at the time, reviewed and cleared by a JAG officer whose name is already familiar to the court. Dean blinked. What documentation? Helen opened the folder and held it up. The official mental evaluation of Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Blackwell, cleared for redeployment under full combat conditions. Mentally sound, emotionally stable, endorsed by both his commanding officer and Judge Harlan Knox. You could hear a pin drop. The judge went still. Dean stammered, That's irrelevant. That was during wartime. And this is parenthood, Helen said. Which one do you think required more emotional clarity? I turned slightly, just enough to meet Darren's eyes. He was watching. He heard every word. And for the first time in weeks, his face didn't look unsure. It looked proud. The night after court, I sat on my porch with a beer in one hand and the old field knife in the other. I didn't drink much, but tonight felt like one of those rare moments when silence deserved company. The kind that didn't talk, didn't judge, just stayed. The knife was clean, still sharp. I hadn't used it in years, but my hand remembered every groove in the handle. Darren had once asked why I kept it next to the bed. To remember who I had to be, I'd said. Now I realized something else. It wasn't just about remembering. It was about reminding the world that who I was didn't vanish when the deployment ended. I was still that man. Still the one who crawled through mud under machine gun fire to drag a wounded private to safety. Still the one who kept calm in chaos, who made decisions under pressure that others couldn't breathe through. Jenna didn't want that version of me in her new life. She wanted someone clean, curated, magazine perfect. Dean Weston. But Darren? He needed the truth. Not the costume. Not the lie. I thought about what the judge must have felt seeing his old signature in that courtroom. That flicker of shame, maybe. Or fear. He could hide behind his robe all he wanted. But deep down, he knew what it meant. He'd seen the same thing I saw on deployment. You don't just sign off on a man's soul and forget it. You own a piece of it. You become part of his story. And now, his part was being exposed. Not by vengeance. By truth. The battlefield had changed. But I hadn't. Helen's office looked like a war room now, files sprawled across her desk, court orders tacked on corkboards, and a dry erase board filled with timelines, case numbers, and one word underlined in red, motive. The judge has seen the file. He can't deny it anymore, she said, crossing her arms. But Dean? He's not going to retreat. Not yet. I nodded. Then we move first. She pointed to the timeline. Look at this. The moment Jenna started filing complaints about your parenting lines up almost perfectly with Dean's firm going under review for ethics violations. 2 weeks later, he marries Jenna. 3 weeks after that, custody war begins. Coincidence? I asked. Calculated, she replied. And now that we've exposed their fake psych eval and cracked Knox's credibility, we go deeper. How? Helen's expression changed, subtle, but lethal. We subpoena every communication between Dean and that evaluator. If there's even a whisper of collusion, I'll bury them with it. I felt a familiar fire in my chest. Same one I felt before missions. That balance of clarity and adrenaline. She kept talking, more determined now. We also dig into Jenna's financials. If Dean's firm is on the verge of collapse, they could be angling for more than just your son. Could be assets. Could be leverage. I left everything to her in the divorce. Yes, she said. And she wants more. That's why she needs to prove you're unfit. If you lose custody, you lose moral standing, legal footing, and reputation. They're planning to erase you. She paused. But here's the twist. They underestimated who they're fighting. I smiled just barely. They think I'm coming to court as a father, I said. They forgot I've led men into hell and back. I don't quit. I don't blink. And I don't lose what I fight for. Helen looked at me, steady. Then it's time we show them who's really holding the line. You want me to act like nothing's happening? I asked. Helen didn't flinch. Exactly that. I stared at her across the desk, jaw clenched. Every instinct I had screamed against it. You don't stay quiet in a fight. You take control. Move first. Press the advantage. But this fight wasn't in the dirt. It was in clean suits and scripted lies. If you blow up now, Helen said, they'll twist it into proof. Unhinged veteran melts down under pressure. You know Dean's waiting for it. I sat back slowly, heart thumping with a pulse I usually felt before breach missions. The kind where hesitation meant body bags. Then I'll play my part, I said. They want calm? I'll give them silence sharp enough to bleed. The next 2 weeks, I did exactly that. I picked up Darren from school with a smile. Never asked about Jenna. Never spoke a word about the trial. Just listened. To his music. To his stress about a math test. To the way he laughed at a joke he clearly didn't find funny just to keep the air light. I watched Jenna at drop-offs too. She scanned my face like she was trying to find a crack. Some twitch. Some misstep. But I gave her nothing. At court, I nodded politely. Took notes. didn't flinch when Dean brought up fabricated screenshots of aggressive text messages he claimed I'd sent. Helen slid each one across the table and calmly pointed out metadata discrepancies. Dean didn't expect that. I locked eyes with him for just a moment. He looked away. Because for the first time, the quiet wasn't a weakness. It was war paint. Darren wasn't himself anymore. He still came over on scheduled weekends. Still dropped his shoes by the door. Still poured way too much cereal in the bowl. But something in his eyes had shifted. It was the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, like he was searching for something. And worse, maybe waiting for something to go wrong. Sunday night, he sat on the couch flipping through Netflix but not really watching. "Something on your mind, kid?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, without turning his head, "Mom said you're gonna lose. That the court's just being nice before they take me away." Silence. I muted the TV. "She said you used to scream in your sleep," he continued, almost robotic. "That you had a breakdown once and punched a wall." I stared at the floor for a long beat. The words hung in the air like a toxic fog. Then I looked at him. "I never punched a wall, Darren. Never screamed at you. And never once have I made this house unsafe. You know that." He nodded slowly. "I know. But when two people tell you something over and over, it's hard not to start wondering." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "That's not your fault, son. It's called conditioning. And I'm not mad at you for feeling confused. But I need you to remember the version of me that you know. Not the one they describe when I'm not there to defend myself." He finally turned his head toward me. "I want to stay with you more," he said. "But I don't want Mom to hate me." My chest cracked at that. "You're not responsible for your parents' choices," I said gently. "But you were allowed to choose the truth." He looked away again, but this time, not in fear. In quiet thought. Maybe, just maybe, the lies were starting to peel. The file was now our sword. Helen had submitted the request for official judicial review of Judge Knox's prior military involvement in my service record. It wasn't a direct accusation yet. It was a chess move. A slow advance. "Knox will know we're circling," she told me in her office. "He'll be forced to explain his past connection to you if this escalates." "And Dean?" I asked. "He's about to feel pressure from another direction." That direction? Helen had reached out to a journalist. An investigative reporter who had already been sniffing around the court for biased rulings and improper relationships between private law firms and judges. "We don't go public yet," she warned. "But we give him just enough of a lead to get curious. Just enough to start pulling at the edges." She smiled. "And when the article hits, we let the court know we're ready to depose the judge if needed. Even if he recuses himself, we win. Because the credibility of their entire case dies with him." I didn't say anything. Not because I disagreed, but because I knew what was coming. And it was going to be brutal. That night, I stood by Darren's bedroom door as he slept. The report was in my hand. Not a weapon. A reminder. I flipped to the page that mattered most. Final conclusion. Subject is emotionally sound. Mentally clear. Leadership capacity intact. Cleared for redeployment. Fully trusted with lives under fire. And below it, Judge Knox's signature. In court, he tried to erase me. But his own pen said otherwise. The truth had always been there. No? It was just classified ammo, waiting for the perfect shot. And I was done holding fire. It started with a license number. Helen's assistant had flagged something odd in Dr. Marion Clyburn's file. The credential she used in our court filing was registered in Arizona, not Virginia. And worse? It expired. "She's not legally allowed to evaluate anyone in this state," Helen said, pacing in front of her desk, fire in her voice. "Which means her entire report. Trash. Unusable. Possibly criminal." We didn't stop there. Our private investigator dug deeper. Turns out, Clyburn wasn't just expired, she had never practiced independently. Her qualifications allowed her to assist in therapy under supervision, not conduct full psych assessments. Her PhD was from an online diploma mill that got shut down 5 years ago. And guess who paid her retainer? Dean Weston. Direct wire transfer. No invoice trail. No documented communication through legal channels. "You think Jenna knows?" I asked Helen. She either knows or doesn't care. But once we submit this discovery to the court, that expert testimony will collapse. We moved quickly. Helen filed a motion to strike the evaluation and requested an inquiry into potential misconduct. The motion included every credential discrepancy, the financial tie to Dean, and 3 screenshots of Clyburn advertising custody consultation services on parenting forums, services that broke licensing laws in multiple states. It wasn't just unethical. It was a full-blown credibility nuke. They thought they brought in a secret weapon, Helen said. What they did was hand us a loaded gun with their fingerprints on the trigger. This wasn't just about Darren anymore. This was about exposing how far Jenna and Dean would go to manipulate the court. And the more we revealed, the more their case unraveled. Darren's 15th birthday fell in the middle of it all. No subpoenas, no lawyers, just me, him, and a steakhouse he liked because they let him pour his own root beer from a tap at the table. He smiled more that night than I'd seen in weeks. Talked about movies, girls, even asked if I'd let him try driving in a parking lot soon. But then he said something that pulled the rug out from under the entire evening. Dean said, "You're going to disappear." I paused, my fork hovering midair. He said, "Once the judge makes a decision, I won't have to deal with your war PTSD anymore. That you'll probably move or, go back to the army or something." I put the fork down slowly. "I'm not going anywhere, Darren." He looked up at me, unsure. "Promise." I leaned in. "No matter what your mom and Dean say, no matter what happens in court, you're my son. That doesn't change." He nodded, then quietly added, "Dean also said you cried during a TV commercial once." I couldn't help the laugh that burst out. I did. It was a dog reunion ad. Thing hit hard, man. Darren laughed too. Full belly laugh. We didn't talk about court after that. We just ate. Joked. For a few hours, we were just father and son again. No lawyers. No guardians. No lies. But the truth came knocking soon after. When I went to pay the bill, I overheard something. Dean's voice. From across the restaurant. "I'm telling you, he's cracking. It's only a matter of time. He thinks the court's still fair. Poor bastard. He didn't know I was there. Didn't know I was standing just 6 feet behind the booth." I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because that night, I realized something. They were convinced I'd already lost. And that arrogance was going to be their downfall. I didn't sleep that night. Not from stress, but clarity. That overheard conversation at the restaurant told me everything I needed to know. Dean wasn't planning for defense. He was walking into court like a man who thought the war was over. And that made him dangerous, but also vulnerable. Because overconfidence is blind. At 6:12 a.m., I printed a single page from the classified report. The one with Knox's signature right below the general's. I slid it into a manila envelope. No return address. Then I added a note in black ink. "You signed this. You knew who I was before you ever saw my face in that courtroom. You want to pretend otherwise? Fine. But this page is just a preview. The rest will be public record soon." I dropped the envelope off at the courthouse security desk with Knox's name on it. No threats. No drama. Just evidence. And a promise. Later that day, Helen got a cryptic call. "Judge Knox has asked for a private chambers conference before our next appearance," she said after hanging up. "He's rattled." "Good," I replied. "He should be." But it didn't end there. 2 hours later, Dean sent an email to the court requesting a delay on the next hearing due to newly discovered documentation requiring review. He was trying to stall. Regroup. They didn't realize they were already bleeding out. Helen looked at me with a rare smile. "You've done something few people manage in court," she said. "What's that?" "You made a man in power afraid of the truth." And for the first time since this whole thing began, I felt it. Not victory, but momentum. The shift. And I wasn't going to stop until the whole damn tower came down. Dean was unraveling. It started with the delay request. Then came the email to Helen, thinly veiled in legalese but oozing desperation. He wanted to negotiate. Said it would be in everyone's best interest to resolve matters outside the courtroom. The man who mocked me in front of my son now wanted a quiet exit. Helen laughed when she read it. He smells the fire creeping up his pant leg. I didn't respond, because I knew what this was. Dean wasn't offering peace. He was trying to cut a deal before the explosion. But there was no deal. Not now. Not when I'd seen the way he weaponized my own son's confusion. Not when he'd sat in that restaurant, sipping wine and bragging about my defeat like he'd already carved my name into a tombstone. No, he didn't get to walk away clean. 2 days later, he called me. Private number. I picked up without speaking. Marcus, he said, voice strained, we don't have to keep this going. This drama. You and Jenna can mediate. Split custody. Save face. I waited. Look, he added, I admit things got heated, but we're all just trying to protect Aaron, right? Now he wanted to talk like fathers. Dean, I said finally, calm and low, you're not trying to protect Aaron. You're trying to protect yourself. Silence. Then I added, but don't worry. I won't ruin you. I'll let the truth do that. I hung up. That afternoon, Helen filed a motion for judicial recusal based on documented conflict of interest, Judge Knox's previous military involvement in my deployment evaluation. The motion included notarized affidavits, email trails, signed timelines. This was no longer a custody dispute. It was a battlefield, and the enemy was bleeding from every side. Court depositions are designed to extract the truth or bury it. We were banking on the first. Dean's voice during the deposition wasn't its usual weaponized confidence. It was tight, controlled, sweating through a silk shirt, despite the air conditioning. Helen sat across from him like a lion behind a glass wall. Calm, sharp, absolutely lethal. Mr. Weston, she began, you submitted an evaluation from Dr. Clyburn. Were you aware that she is not licensed to practice in Virginia? Dean shifted in his chair. At the time, we believed her license was valid. My team, he corrected. We believed her to be credible. Helen nodded. Were you aware she was paid directly from your private account? Dean hesitated. That's standard. For you to pay your wife's expert witness, personally, from a private retainer? That's standard. Silence. Helen smiled. Let's move on. For nearly 2 hours, she danced around him, pinning him with questions laced with landmines. By the time it was over, Dean looked like he'd just come out of a 10-mile run. Jenna was next. She was colder, more rehearsed, but she cracked too. When asked if she'd discussed the outcome of the case with Judge Knox outside court, she hesitated. Just long enough. That pause was everything. Helen pounced. You hesitated. Why? I didn't expect the question. It's a simple question. Yes or no? Jenna's smile thinned. No, I haven't. But it was too late. The court reporter had captured that pause, that delay, that weakness. And so had we. Outside, as I buttoned my coat, Helen caught up. They're folding, she said. Good. Next hearing, she added. I want you to bring that report. The original. We're submitting it into full evidence. With a certified military authentication. No more slow plays? I asked. No more mercy, she replied. That night, I sat in Darren's room while he slept. The lamp glowed dim beside his desk. Textbooks stacked unevenly. A basketball jersey draped over his chair. Headphones half hung off the side of his bed, one barely pulsing with music he must have fallen asleep to. He looked peaceful, like the world hadn't touched him yet. I wanted it to stay that way. But war doesn't let people stay untouched. Even kids. Even the innocent. I sat in the corner, quietly. Just watching. Letting my thoughts settle. In a few days, I'd be in court again, this time with the full report. With Knox's name and signature filed into record. With Dean fumbling through excuses. With Jenna's credibility cracked down the middle. But none of that mattered more than this moment. Because for all the tactics and files and courtroom maneuvers, the war had always been about this one thing. This boy. My son. And for the first time, I didn't need to say a word. He stirred slightly, turning in his sleep. A murmur. Then silence again. I stood slowly, walked over, and placed a hand on his shoulder. You won't remember this night, I whispered. But I will. Because this was the night before everything changed. I walked out, leaving the lamp on. I wanted him to wake to light. Because tomorrow, the darkness wasn't coming for him anymore. It was coming for the ones who tried to take him from me. Courtroom 3B was quiet, the kind of silence that builds before a storm. Knox walked in 5 minutes late. That never happened. His robe was crisp, but his jaw was tight. I starting. He already knew what Helen had filed. I had the report in my hand. Not a copy. The original. Certified. Stamped. Backed by the very military institution that built me. Darren sat in the back row beside his appointed counselor. His eyes flicked from me to the judge. He knew something was different today. Helen rose first. Your Honor, pursuant to our motion and following evidence discovery protocols, we are formally submitting this document into full record. She approached the bench and handed over the sealed envelope. Knox took it like it burned. He didn't open it immediately. Dean stood. Tried to object. Your Honor, we still contest the relevance of this document. It's your co-counsel's own name on it. Helen snapped, calm but merciless. Signed as a JAG officer overseeing my client's mental evaluation during wartime. Knox cleared his throat, the sound unusually dry. He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the page. And stopped, right where his signature lay. He blinked, once, twice. Helen turned to the room. Let the record show that Judge Harlan Knox previously evaluated Lieutenant Colonel Blackwell for mental stability and declared him emotionally fit to lead soldiers into hostile combat zones. She turned to me, then to Darren. And yet today, he sits here allowing testimony that the same man is unfit to raise his own child. Gasps echoed behind us. Darren leaned forward slightly. Knox closed the folder. This hearing will recess for review, he said tightly. 30 minutes. But I saw it. In that pause before the gavel dropped, the walls weren't cracking anymore. They were collapsing. During the break, I sat outside on a concrete bench. No movement. No phone. Just the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. Then Helen walked up, holding her phone like it had just detonated. There's more. I turned to her. More what? She showed me the screen. A military form. Same report. But this time with a second signature. Not just Knox. The psychologist who co-signed the report? Marion Clyburn. I stared at it. That's not possible, I said. She's the one Dean brought in. Helen nodded. Exactly. She was legitimate once. Attached to the military as an intern during your assessment. Her credentials were real until she left and started selling fake consults under expired licenses. I leaned back, blood roaring in my ears. So they brought in the same woman, the same one who once confirmed I was mentally sound, to now claim I'm unfit? Yes, Helen said. And she thought no one would notice. Did Dean know? I asked. Helen gave me a look. Dean paid her directly. The same woman who once signed off on your stability is now fabricating claims to destroy your reputation for a check. It hit me then. This wasn't coincidence. This was conspiracy. Carefully built. Deliberately constructed. A narrative tailored from pieces of truth repackaged as lies. This changes everything, I said quietly. Helen's voice sharpened. We don't just have a conflict of interest now. We have a judicial cover-up and a discredited expert who perjured herself. And if we bring this up in court? Her smile returned. We don't bring it up. We don't. She shook her head. We detonated. Back in the courtroom, the mood had shifted. Knox re-entered with tighter posture, like he was holding in an earthquake. Dean whispered to Jenna, who looked visibly pale now, like a woman watching her house catch fire from the porch. The bailiff called us to order. Helen stood first, slow and confident. Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence to submit into record today. It pertains to the credibility of Dr. Marianne Clyburn and the intentional misrepresentation of her current qualifications. Dean stood too fast. Objection. This wasn't, she's listed on 2 reports, Your Honor. Helen cut in. One from her time in military service, co-signed by you, and one just submitted as independent evaluation by the opposing counsel. Same person. Opposite conclusions. One truth. Jenna visibly froze. Helen didn't stop. She was once qualified. Once trusted. And today, she's a fraud, submitting ghostwritten evaluations for a paycheck. She turned slowly, deliberately, toward the back, where Darren Saturday, in the military, we were taught that truth isn't flexible. that it doesn't change depending on who's paying. Mr. Blackwell was trusted to command lives under enemy fire. But here, in this court, his reputation was ambushed by lies, bought and sold like weapons. The room was silent. Darren blinked hard, then looked at his mom. Jenna tried to smile at him, but it didn't land. The judge cleared his throat again, but this time it cracked. This court will review the new material and reconvene for ruling at the next hearing. He rose, but no one moved. Because in that room, something irreversible had just happened. The courtroom didn't see a soldier anymore. They saw a father and the people who tried to break him. The pieces clicked while I was driving Darren back to Jenna's for the week. He was quiet, staring out the window, earbuds in but no music playing. I didn't push him. I just watched the road. As we pulled up to their gated community, something caught my eye, a for sale sign in the neighbor's yard. Same model house. Asking price, $2.2 million. That didn't sit right. Jenna didn't have a job. Dean was flashy, but I knew from Helen's research that his firm had been under internal review for over a year. Financial misconduct, hush-hush settlements, ethics questions. I dropped Darren off, waved like normal. But the second I got home, I made a call. Helen picked up. You sound tense. What if this custody case isn't just about Darren? Silence on the line. Then, you think they're angling for more? Think about it, I said. If I'm labeled unstable, I lose not just Darren. I lose control of any trust fund, any residual marital assets still in my name. And Dean? If his career collapses, Jenna needs leverage. Leverage that looks like permanent custody. Helen was already typing before I finished. We're going to follow the money, she said. Subpoena every financial movement from Dean and Jenna going back 2 years. If they were planning this, there's a paper trail. A day later, it started to appear. Transfers between Jenna's name and an offshore account. Consulting fees paid to Clyburn that were triple standard market rate. A ghost LLC formed 6 months after Dean married Jenna, tied to a shell property in Florida. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a business model. And Darren? He was just collateral. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. They wanted to turn my son into a pawn on their balance sheet? Not on my watch. It all started with a single payment. $15,000 wired to an account labeled Hollowpine Consulting the same month Clyburn wrote her fraudulent evaluation. Helen's investigator traced it. Hollowpine had no website, no office, and no registered staff. But it did have a tax filing. One address. A P.O. box. Under Jenna's maiden name. She thought hiding it under an old identity would keep it buried. Helen said, arms crossed as we reviewed the report in her office. But this is criminal. Not just unethical. Criminal. The motion we filed that week was brutal. It called for a full review of Jenna and Dean's financial assets, citing fraud, witness tampering, and perjury. And we weren't subtle. We included every bank transfer, every email chain where Clyburn casually asked for the final script, every notarized timestamp linking her to Dean directly. In court, Dean tried to object. But this time, the judge didn't even let him speak. Mr. Weston, Knox said, you will sit down. Now, Dean froze, then obeyed. Jenna looked around like the walls were closing in. Because they were. Helen stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, this case is no longer just about custody. It's about manipulation of the legal system itself. My client has remained silent through smear campaigns, fraudulent evaluations, and judicial bias. He has stayed respectful, dignified. And now we submit that dignity must be met with justice. Knox said nothing. He simply nodded. Court adjourned with tension so thick you could chew it. As we stepped out into the hallway, Helen whispered, they're collapsing. Everything they built was a facade. Now it's dust. And I knew she was right. But it wasn't over yet. Because I still had one thing left to do. Look my son in the eye and tell him the full truth. I didn't want to drag this into the public. But they left me no choice. The truth had been weaponized in the dark. It was time to bring it into the light. Helen arranged a meeting with investigative reporter Diane Reeves, known for exposing judicial corruption, disbarred lawyers, and quietly buried scandals. The kind of woman who didn't flinch from power. We met in a coffee shop in Arlington. Small place. Neutral ground. She wore a gray blazer and spoke like a surgeon, precise, focused, no time wasted. You sure you want this public? She asked. The minute it hits, it won't just be about them. Your name gets dragged too. I don't care, I said. As long as the truth's intact. She nodded. I've read the affidavits. The financials. The dual signatures. It's a house of lies built on arrogance. And you've built a damn good case to burn it to the ground. I handed her the final copy of the deployment report. The original Knox signature. The matching Clyburn endorsement. This is what their credibility hangs on, I said. This paper and the lie they build around it. She took it with both hands, like it was evidence from a crime scene. I'll do it right, she promised. And she did. 2 weeks later, the article dropped. From the battlefield to the courtroom, the war on one veteran's fatherhood. It exploded across legal forums, veteran communities, and even national news outlets. Public pressure rose. The court received formal letters from state bar associations. Knox was suddenly under ethics review. Dean's firm was publicly distancing themselves from him. And Jenna? She stopped smiling altogether. Helen forwarded me the article link that morning. Underneath it, she wrote, War's turning. Now they run. We don't. The courtroom felt different that morning. Not because anything looked changed. Same wood panels, same aging judge's bench, same pews. But because the balance of power had shifted. You could feel it. Judge Knox walked in slower than usual. His robe was still ironed, still pristine. But his eyes, they didn't carry the same certainty anymore. The weight of the article had landed. Hard. He opened with no pleasantries. No posturing. Before we proceed, he said, voice gravelly, I need to disclose that I have been made aware of a journalistic piece involving this case, which has drawn attention to prior military associations and signatures that include my own. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I am considering recusal. Dean shot up. Your Honor, we would strongly prefer to keep jurisdiction with the original bench. Helen rose slowly. We support recusal, Your Honor. In fact, we respectfully request it. Knox nodded. Then, for the first time since this war began, he looked straight at me. His words came slow, cautious. Lieutenant Colonel Blackwell, you deserved better than what's unfolded here. I gave a small nod. Not out of respect, out of acknowledgement. He wasn't the enemy. Not really. He was just a weak man trying to forget a past where he once did the right thing, and couldn't stand to be reminded of it. By the time he left the bench, a substitute judge was already being reviewed. A special hearing was scheduled for the following week. Dean looked like someone had pulled the oxygen out of his lungs. Jenna kept her eyes down the whole time. They thought the system would protect them. Now the system was clearing a path for justice. And this time, I wasn't walking in wounded. I was walking in ready to finish what they started. The special hearing was held in a larger courtroom downtown. Media was now allowed and under limited access. There were no cameras, but that didn't stop the murmurs or the half-stifled gasps when I walked in. No suit today. I wore my old army dress uniform. Not as a performance. As a statement. I wasn't hiding anymore. And I wasn't letting them rewrite who I was. Dean walked in seconds later, his face pinched. Tired. He didn't meet my eyes. Jenna followed, quieter than I'd ever seen her. She wore navy blue, minimal makeup. But no matter how she dressed it, the guilt didn't wash off. Helen stood beside me, steel in her voice as she addressed the judge, a new face. Firm. Direct. No patience for games. Your Honor, the entirety of our argument now hinges on what this courtroom values more, manipulated narratives or verified truth. She held up 2 documents, one in each hand. In my left, the fraudulent evaluation submitted by Ms. Clyburn, now discredited and under investigation. And in my right, the original assessment signed by a general and a former JAG officer, affirming Mr. Blackwell's mental stability and leadership fitness under war conditions. The judge nodded. Both are already entered into record. Proceed. Helen turned slowly toward Dean and Jenna. Tell the court, she said, voice low but cutting, how a woman who once evaluated this man as stable enough to lead in combat now claims he's unfit to coach his son's soccer team. What changed? Dean tried to object. The judge denied it. Jenna finally raised her voice. She's not the same person anymore. People change. Helen didn't flinch. So does accountability. Silence followed. And then the judge said, "This case will move forward to ruling. Final witness statements will be allowed next session. Be prepared." Dean looked rattled. Jenna looked broken. And me? I stood taller than I ever had before. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the verdict. I remember walking into that last hearing like it was a battlefield. The new judge, stern-eyed and expressionless, didn't bother with ceremony. "Final statements," she announced. No outbursts. No interruptions. Dean stood first. His statement was polished, full of half-truths and legal polish. He painted Jenna as a mother acting out of concern. He downplayed the fabricated evaluation, saying she was misled by bad advice. I could see right through it. So could everyone else in that room. When Helen stood, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "My client is not asking for revenge," she began. "He's asking for truth to matter. For honesty, honor, and consistency to return to a system that almost let them be erased." She gestured to me. "To tell a decorated war veteran that he's unfit to parent based on manipulated documents is not just unethical, it's dangerous. It tells every parent out there that the truth can be twisted for leverage." Then she turned to the judge. "Today we are not asking for sympathy. We are asking for recognition of fact. That this man, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Blackwell, is not just fit to raise his son. He is the only one in this room who hasn't lied to do it." The judge nodded. "Mr. Blackwell, you may speak if you wish." I stood, walked to the front. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I've led soldiers under fire, buried brothers in arms, watched young men cry for their mothers as they bled out beside me, and I still came home and built a life. I've never been perfect, but I have never stopped fighting for my son. I paused. He doesn't need a perfect father. He just needs a real one. Then I looked at Jenna. And I'll be that, whether this courtroom approves or not. The night before the judge's ruling, I couldn't sleep. So I pulled out a photo album I hadn't touched in years. Inside were moments frozen in dust. Me and my unit in Afghanistan, sitting on ammo crates playing cards. Monroe grinning wide before our last patrol. A blurry shot of me and the field tent where the assessment took place, the one Knox had signed inside. My fingers stopped at a photo I'd almost forgotten. Me shaking hands with Knox. He wasn't a judge back then, just a military lawyer in a tan uniform, clipboard in hand. He had told me then, "Blackwell, you're the kind of man we need out here. You don't break under pressure. You keep others together." I remember smiling. Back then, his words meant something. Now, I realized something else. He'd known it all along. His silence in court had never been ignorance. It was fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of facing the man he once believed in, and the damage he did by turning away. I put the photo down and stood by the window. The city lights outside blurred behind the glass. Tomorrow, the court would decide custody. But no matter the outcome, I had already won something bigger. I hadn't lost myself, and I hadn't lost my son. I just had to hold the line one last time. He cracked right there on the stand. You could see it before it happened, the sweat on his neck, the tremble in his fingers as he picked up a water bottle, the way he looked down when the judge asked the question. "Did you knowingly submit testimony from a falsified expert witness whose license was not valid in the state of Virginia?" Dean hesitated. I was misinformed. Helen stood immediately. Objection. Evasion. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Weston, you are under oath. Answer the question directly." Dean swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "But I didn't. Look, I didn't write the report. I passed it along." Gasps rippled across the gallery. Jenna turned her head sharply, eyes locked on Dean like he'd just set the house on fire with her still inside. "You paid her," Helen said. "From your private account." Dean's voice cracked. "Jenna said we needed it. She said Marcus was impossible to beat unless we had something strong." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed the gavel. Order. But it was done. The lie unraveled in real time. The man who'd orchestrated months of attacks folded under pressure like a file with no spine. Dean didn't just lose credibility. He surrendered it. And for the first time in the entire process, he looked scared. "Dean, you absolute coward." She hissed it under her breath, but everyone heard it. Dean had barely left the witness stand before Jenna stood to take her place. She walked like she was heading to war. But her face, it wasn't defiant anymore. It was cracked. "Ms. Blackwell," the judge began, "you've just heard your co-petitioner testify to knowingly submitting falsified evidence. Do you wish to proceed with your claim?" Jenna didn't answer right away. She looked toward Darren, her son, our son, who was seated with the counselor. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even looking at her. He was watching me. "I was trying to protect him," Jenna said, voice flat. Helen stood. "Protect him from what?" "His father." "No. From becoming his father." And there it was. Raw. Ugly. Real. "I didn't want Darren growing up with war in the house," Jenna added. "The way Marcus talks. The things he keeps hidden. It's like living with ghosts." I stood, not out of anger, but because it was time. "Those ghosts," I said, "are my brothers. They're the reason I never let our son feel afraid. Because I know what fear really looks like." Jenna's voice cracked. "You never let me in. You shut the world out. I built a wall to survive. You chose to tear me down because you couldn't climb it." She sat back down slowly. But her mask? Gone. And she knew it. The morning after the hearing, Helen called me before I'd finished my coffee. "She's stepping down." I blinked. "Who?" "Judge Turner. She's recusing herself. Says the case is too compromised after everything that's come out." "Can they do that this late?" "They can." And she did. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just stared out the window as the rain tapped against the glass. "What does this mean for the verdict?" I asked. Helen's voice stayed calm. "A new judge will review the full transcript and make the final ruling, based on all evidence already submitted." I felt my chest tighten. "You think they'll see it clearly?" "They'd have to be blind not to." "But yes, I think we're past the tipping point." Dean had disappeared, not legally, but professionally. His firm put him on administrative leave. Jenna's legal rep dropped her case that afternoon. The court had assigned her a public counsel for final proceedings. She was alone now. Every lie, every setup, exposed and discredited. But none of it felt like revenge. It felt like relief. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted my son back. And now, I could feel that moment coming, closer with every breath. The judge who replaced Turner was a man named Justice Monroe, sharp, fair, no political ties to the local legal machine. The courtroom was quiet, tense, final. He reviewed the case publicly, flipping through files as he spoke. "What I've seen is a man misjudged by people who once claimed to love him, and manipulated by those who feared what they couldn't control." He looked at me, then at Darren. "Custody is hereby awarded solely to Mr. Marcus Blackwell, pending full parental counseling evaluation and weekly wellness check-ins for the next 90 days. Gasps. Then silence. I didn't react at first. I couldn't. I was too focused on Darren, on the way his eyes lit up, then filled, then blinked fast like he didn't want to be the kid who cried. The judge continued, "Visitation for Ms. Jenna Blackwell is suspended pending review. A hearing may be scheduled in 6 months to reconsider based on behavioral and psychological reassessment." Jenna stood, but didn't argue. She just nodded and walked out. No fight left. No mask left. No lies left. I walked out of that courtroom, my son beside me, and for the first time in years, I felt like the war was over. Not one. Ended. Judge Monroe didn't waste time. The custody verdict had barely settled before he ordered a review of every questionable ruling Knox had made in his last 3 years on the bench. He demanded a disciplinary hearing for Clyburn. And for Dean? A formal report was filed with the state bar. Helen updated me while we sat outside the courthouse. 3 complaints already launched against Dean, she said. His license won't survive this. I nodded slowly, watching people pass by without noticing me. For the first time in a long while, I felt invisible again, but in a good way. Not like a target. Like a man at peace. "And Jenna?" I asked. Helen hesitated. She's been quiet. We've requested no contact for 90 days. Judge approved it. Good, I said. Darren needs space. He needs you, Helen corrected. He's watching every move now. Later that evening, I found Darren in his room, organizing his desk drawer, something he only did when his thoughts were messy. You all right? I asked, leaning on the doorframe. You didn't turn. They said you'd lose. I heard. He looked over his shoulder, finally. But you didn't. No, I said. Because I had something they didn't. He waited. Truth. And you. Darren didn't smile. But his shoulders relaxed. That was enough. It was a week after the ruling when I found it. Tucked in the side of Darren's backpack while cleaning his room, a spiral notebook, half-used. The kind teenagers forget exists. I wasn't snooping, just shifting things around. But a page had been dog-eared and stuck out. Curiosity pulled me in. The header read, "Stuff I'm afraid to say out loud." I froze. Then I read, "I don't know how to be mad at Mom and still love her. Dean told me real men don't cry. But Dad cried once when I fell off my bike, and I felt safer than ever. I thought maybe if I stopped talking, no one would ask me to choose." Each line hit harder than the last. I closed the journal gently, placed it back where I found it. Later that night, as we sat at the dinner table, just the two of us, I looked across at him. "You don't have to protect anyone from the truth anymore," I said. He looked up slowly. "You read it?" he asked. I didn't lie. "Yes." Darren nodded once. Then quietly, "I'm glad you did." There were no tears. But there was a silence between us that felt less like distance and more like understanding. The headline popped up on my phone while I was checking the weather. Attorney Dean Weston disbarred in wake of custody fraud scandal. I didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just turned the screen over and placed the phone down. Justice had already been served. The rest was noise. But a message came through an hour later, anonymous number. "You won, but you still ruined 2 lives. Was it worth it?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "I didn't ruin them. They did that themselves. I just stopped the damage from reaching my son." Blocked the number. Went back to my coffee. That evening, Helen called. "Our results just came through. He's done. No appeal. No license. Nothing." I figured. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, looking out at Darren kicking a soccer ball in the yard. "I think I finally am." She paused. "You did something rare, Marcus." "What's that?" "You made a broken system admit it was wrong." I didn't answer. Because for once, silence said everything. 1 month passed. No drama. No court dates. Just normal mornings with burnt toast and mismatched socks. Darren adjusted slowly. He didn't talk much about his mom. I didn't push. Instead, we created new patterns. Saturday morning hikes. Late-night Marvel marathons. He even started leaving his door open again, something he hadn't done in months. One evening, we sat on the porch watching a storm roll in. Thunder distant. Sky purple. "Do you think Mom hates me now?" he asked suddenly. "No," I said. "She's hurting. But that's not your burden to carry." He nodded. "I still miss her. Even though she lied." "That's okay. She said you'd never forgive her." I thought for a moment, then answered truthfully. "I don't hate her, but I'll never let her hurt you again." The rain started then, light, rhythmic. And Darren leaned against my shoulder, just for a second. That night, I stood by his door again before bed. No fear, no tension, just a father watching his son sleep in peace. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a battle won. It felt like a home restored. 3 weeks after the final ruling, I received an official notice from the court. Jenna had filed a written statement. No requests, no objections, just a submission for the record. Helen called me that afternoon. "I read it," she said. "You might want to prepare yourself." "Is it hostile?" "No," she replied. "That's what makes it hard." It wasn't legally required, but I asked for a copy. I read it alone, typed, and signed at the bottom, but clearly her voice. I spent years resenting a man who didn't know how to let me in. I confused silence with coldness. What I didn't see, or maybe didn't want to, was the man who never stopped protecting us, even when we didn't ask for it. even when we didn't deserve it. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want Darren to know I loved him, that everything I did, as wrong as it turned out to be, came from fear, not hatred. If there's any part of me left in his heart, I hope it remembers who I was before I lost myself. I folded the page, sat in my chair, and just breathed. No fireworks, no shouting, no gavel slamming, just closure. Sometimes that's louder than anything else. The article Diane wrote hadn't stopped echoing. It was picked up by a national veterans blog, then a major news outlet, then a talk show. Veterans started emailing me. Men I didn't know. Women who'd lost custody battles. Fathers who'd been silenced by stigma. You gave us a blueprint. They called me crazy too. You made me feel sane again. I tried to reply to every single one. I couldn't keep up. But one message stuck out. A former Navy officer who'd lost visitation after his ex used PTSD against him. He wrote, "You didn't win a custody case. You declared war on the lie that soldiers can't be parents. And you won for all of us." I showed it to Darren. He read it 3 times, then said, "They're right, you know. I didn't do it for them." "But you did," he said. "You just didn't know it." I didn't reply, because maybe he was right. Maybe this wasn't just my story anymore. There was one last appearance in court procedural, to finalize paperwork, close the loop. Jenna didn't show. Her attorney did, quiet, professional. She didn't challenge anything. When the judge reviewed the file, she glanced at me. Not with suspicion, not with sympathy, with respect. "You've handled yourself with restraint, Mr. Blackwell," she said. "Rare in cases like this." "Didn't feel like restraint," I answered. "That's what makes it real." Helen smiled beside me. "No further action," the judge declared. Case closed. Custody final. It wasn't dramatic. No cheering gallery. No teary-eyed monologues. But as we walked out of that courtroom, the same halls where I was once told to sit down, soldier, I felt taller. Not because I was victorious. Because I was still standing. I ran into Dean 2 weeks later. Not planned. Not staged. It was a hardware store. I was buying paint samples for Darren's room. He wanted to try something new, navy blue with white trim. Dean turned the corner, pushing a cart with nothing in it. He saw me. Froze. I expected a confrontation. Instead, he looked down and kept walking. No swagger. No fake grin. No words. Just a man stripped of the mask he wore too long. I didn't chase him. Didn't speak. I just kept walking toward the paint aisle. As I opened the swatch book, I realized something. This was never about destroying him. It was about protecting what mattered. I picked a color Darren would like, paid in cash, and walked out with a heart that finally felt light. The smell of fresh paint filled Darren's room, a deep navy blue across the walls, clean white trim just like he'd imagined. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smirking. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing near the corner by the window. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and turned. "That's creative lighting, not a miss." He laughed, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months, unguarded, whole. We both stood in silence for a moment, looking at the new space. It wasn't just a room. It was a fresh start. "I think it looks good," he said finally. "You chose it," I replied. "I just did the labor." Then, without warning, he added, "You think things will go back to normal?" I leaned against the ladder. "I don't think we go back, but we go forward." He nodded. "I'm okay with that." There was a pause. Not heavy, just reflective. "Do you think she's okay?" he asked. I didn't lie. "I think she's figuring it out." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. That night, we didn't eat at the table. We ordered pizza, sat on the floor of his half-finished room, and watched the ceiling fan spin while the scent of new walls settled around us. He didn't know it yet, but that room had already done more healing than a courtroom ever could. Word spread fast. Knox officially retired quietly, under the radar. No press release. No ceremony. Just gone. Clyburn was suspended from all clinical practice pending a criminal fraud investigation. And Dean? A small line in a legal publication confirmed his disbarment was permanent. Last seen leaving the state. Helen texted me a link. System swept. And you're still standing. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was clarity. I met Helen for lunch the following week, something normal. Not over case files or deadlines. She raised her glass of iced tea. To men who didn't break. I smiled faintly. To the ones who kept showing up anyway. She studied me for a moment. You ever think about what you'd have done if it hadn't worked? I thought about Darren. About nights alone. About every insult swallowed in silence. I'd have fought anyway, I said. Because it was never about whether I could win. It was about making sure they knew I wouldn't give up. She leaned back. That's what changed everything. And she was right. It wasn't the system that saved us. It was resistance. I stood in the garage that Saturday, sifting through boxes I hadn't touched in years. One was labeled in Jenna's handwriting, Marcus's stuff. Inside, my old military gear, photo albums, a set of cufflinks I thought she'd thrown out. I placed each item on the workbench like evidence in a museum. Not because I needed to live in the past, but because I needed to see how far I'd come. I pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, my grandfather's watch. I hadn't worn it in years. Not since our anniversary, the last one before the divorce. The glass face was cracked. I turned it over and saw the inscription he'd had carved years ago. Time only breaks what was never built to last. I strapped it to my wrist. Cracked or not, it still ticked. And so did I. Later that day, I opened the windows in the house. Every single one. Let the sunlight in. Let the breeze move through the walls like it had been waiting years to do so. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was mine again. I went to the Veterans Center for the first time in months. Not because I needed help that day, but because I finally wanted to talk. The room smelled like old coffee and worn carpet, the kind that always reminded me of waiting rooms and wartime briefings. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was healing. The group leader nodded when I sat. No introductions needed, just quiet understanding. One by one, men and women spoke. Some with tears, some without. When it was my turn, I cleared my throat. I lost more than I thought I had. Not just in combat, but after. Piece by piece, without realizing. I paused. But I found something too. A son who still believes in me. A truth I didn't have to prove with shouting. Just showing up. Every day. Silence followed. Then, soft claps. No cheers. No drama. Just recognition. Afterward, a younger vet stopped me at the door. You're the guy from the article, right? I nodded. He swallowed hard. Thanks for not letting them rewrite you. I didn't have a response then. But on the way home, I realized something. They tried to redefine me with labels, with ink, with court documents. But in the end, only I get to decide who I am. It was Darren's parent-teacher night. The first one since the ruling. The halls buzzed with nervous parents and exhausted teachers, but Darren seemed calm and more grounded. He walked ahead of me, nodding to classmates, cracking a smile when he saw a poster with his art pinned dead center. Pretty good, right? He asked. I nodded. Better than good. Mrs. Hunt, his English teacher, greeted us with that cautious professionalism schools used when divorce was in the air. But this time, there was no tension, no custody looming. Just us. Darren's reading has jumped to full grade level, she said, gesturing to his folder. He's more focused, more vocal in class. Whatever's changed, it's working. I looked at him. He met my eyes, then turned away, modest but proud. When we left the classroom, we passed by the guidance counselor's table. An extra chair sat beside the stack of forms. Darren looked at it, then at me. She used to sit there, he said quietly. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. After a moment, he added, it's okay. You being here is enough. I squeezed his shoulder. Always will be. And as we walked out into the night air, I realized something profound. It wasn't the chair that mattered. It was who stayed in it. That night, I sat at the dining table with a glass of water and an envelope I hadn't opened. It was postmarked 2 weeks ago. Jenna's handwriting on the front. I opened it. Inside were two things. A photo of Darren as a baby, me holding him in a hospital chair, eyes half closed from fatigue, but smiling wide. And a letter. You don't have to read this. But I needed to send it. Not for closure. Just for truth. You were a better father than I allowed myself to admit. I confused structure with coldness, silence with judgment. I pushed you away, then punished you for the distance. And somehow, after all that, you still showed up. For him. For you. For us. Even when I didn't deserve it. I'm not asking for a second chance. Just that someday, Darren knows I loved him in the only way I knew how. Even if it wasn't the way he needed. I read it twice. Then folded it. Not out of anger. But understanding. Because it wasn't a plea. It was a woman finally facing herself. And that mattered more than any courtroom ruling ever could. Fall settled and fast. Crisp air, leaves like fire on the pavement, and Saturday mornings that now belonged to football fields and sideline cheers. Darren made the team. Backup wide receiver. Still learning the plays. Still learning confidence. But he loved it. I sat in the bleachers, coffee in hand, watching him take his stance. His movements were awkward, but getting better. Coach yelled, "Eyes up, Darren. Anticipate." He nodded, sprinted again, missed the catch. Still got up smiling. I clapped anyway. After practice, he walked over, wiping sweat off his brow with his sleeve. "Think I'll make starter someday?" he asked. "You already are," I said. "You show up. You don't quit. That's a starter in my book." He grinned. "You're biased." "Damn right." Then, unprompted, he added, "I think I forgive her." I didn't ask who. Didn't need to. "I don't forget," he clarified. "But I don't want to carry it around forever. That's called growing up. I think it's called peace." We walked to the truck in silence. And in that silence, something finally settled. Not everything had to be healed completely to be okay. We took the long way home that evening. Windows down. Classic rock playing just loud enough to drown out thoughts. Darren reached over and turned it down. "What was your favorite part of being in the Army?" I didn't expect the question. "The people," I said. "The trust. Knowing someone had your back even when everything else was falling apart." He nodded. "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes." "You ever wish things had gone differently?" "With Mom? With court?" I glanced at him. "No," I said honestly. "Because then maybe you wouldn't have become this version of you." He looked out the window. "Yeah, I kinda like this version." The sun dipped behind the trees, gold spilling across the windshield like an old photograph. It hit me then, all the fights, all the scars, all the courtroom battles weren't about erasing the pain. They were about earning the peace that came after it. We pulled into the driveway. Lights on. Warm porch. A home. Not perfect, but finally ours. I wasn't looking for it. I was just clearing out an old drawer in the guest room, converting it into a home office now that life had steadied. But when I opened that velvet case, time stopped. Jenna's wedding ring. She must have tossed it in there during the move-out. It still caught the light like it used to, but something about it felt foreign now. Like it belonged to a different life, someone else's story. I turned it over in my hand. No engraving. Just polished weight in history. Darren walked in without knocking, paused when he saw it. "You gonna keep it?" I looked at him. "No. I think it's time to let it go." He didn't ask why. Just nodded. Later that night, I wrapped the ring in a cloth, placed it in a small wooden box, and tucked it into a donation bag bound for a local veteran support center. Not out of bitterness. Out of release. Some things aren't meant to be worn again. They're meant to be laid to rest. It was raining when I finally called her. Not to reopen wounds, but to close them right. Jenna answered on the third ring. She didn't sound guarded, just tired. "Marcus." "Yeah." A pause. "I didn't think I'd hear from you." "I know." I took a breath. "I'm not calling to argue. I'm calling because Darren's stable now. And I think you should know that." Her breath hitched. "I've seen him. From afar. At practice. You could have come closer." I wasn't sure I deserved to. Another pause. Then I said, "You still have to earn back his trust. But he doesn't hate you. He just needed space." We both did. Her voice cracked. Do you hate me?" I closed my eyes, leaned against the wall. "No, I don't." The rain tapped the windows like a slow drumbeat. We didn't say goodbye. We just ended the call. And somehow, that was the kindest way to let it go. Friday night used to be quiet. But now it was ours. Darren insisted on cooking. Pancakes and eggs, Because breakfast at night feels illegal, he'd said. I watched him fumble a spatula flip, yolk bursting across the pan. He swore under his breath. You're getting better, I said. He grinned. Yeah, better at cleaning up my messes. We ate at the counter, laughing about nothing. No phones. No distractions. Just forks clinking and syrup dripping. Then he asked something I wasn't ready for. Will you ever date again? I blinked. That came out of nowhere. He shrugged. You're not old. You're just emotionally scary. I laughed out loud for the first time in days. I think I'll know when it's time. He nodded. Okay. But she has to like pancakes. Later that night, he went to bed with the door cracked. And I sat on the porch, mug in hand, realizing something. Healing wasn't a destination. It was this. These little normal nights. One after another. Until you didn't have to check your pulse anymore. I found it in Darren's backpack again, not hidden, just waiting. A letter in Jenna's handwriting. Folded twice. Left unread. I debated, then knocked softly on his door. He looked up from his game. Yeah. I held the letter out. She wrote to you. He took it. Didn't open it. Just stared. You don't have to read it now, I said. He nodded. I turned to leave. Then he spoke. Did she write you one too? Yeah. Did it help? I thought about it. It helped me forgive a version of her that didn't know how to love the right way. He didn't reply. Just looked at the envelope again. That night, he came to the living room, letter opened in hand. She said she's going to therapy. Said she's not asking to come back. Just wants to be better. I waited. I believe her, he said quietly. But I'm not ready yet. I nodded. That's okay. He leaned into me, shoulder to shoulder. I'm still glad she tried. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a man holding everything together. I felt like a father raising a son strong enough to let go. The community center opened a new memorial wall for local veterans that fall. Darren asked if I'd go with him. We stood in a quiet hallway lined with polished plaques, etched names, and folded flags under glass. Soft lighting. No music. Just the quiet hum of memory. I showed him Monroe's name. And Ray's. And two others who never came back. Did they know? He asked. That I made it? I replied. He shook his head. That they'd never come home. I exhaled. Some did. Some didn't. That's the risk of signing up. You go hoping to return, but ready not to. He stared at the names longer than I expected. Then, you ever think it should have been you instead? That one hit. But I didn't flinch. Every day. And every day, I do something with the time they didn't get. He nodded, stepped back, and took a photo of Ray's plaque. I want to remember his name, he said. I didn't say anything. I just placed a hand on his back as we walked out. And for once, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was honor. Helen called one afternoon out of the blue. Spoiler alert, she said. I'm moving to Chicago. I stood in the garage, dumbfounded. Seriously? I've been offered a leadership role with a veteran advocacy group out there. I'd be crazy to pass it up. I leaned on the workbench, heart heavier than expected. You saved my life, I said simply. She laughed, but it cracked a little. No, Marcus. You saved your own. I just passed the damn ammo. We met for coffee 2 days later, our last meeting before she left town. She handed me a file. Just so you have it. I raised an eyebrow. Legal paperwork. Nope, she said, sipping her tea. A letter of recommendation. In case you ever decide to go into advocacy, mentorship, training, whatever, you have a voice people listen to now. I looked at the envelope. You think I'd be good at that? I think you already are. We hugged in the parking lot. Tight. Real. I'll see you again, I said. She nodded. Count on it. And just like that, the woman who helped me hold the line passed the torch. October brought rain, yellow leaves, and Darren's first starting game. He was nervous. Didn't show it at first, but I could see it in how he tied and retied his cleats. How he checked his phone 3 times without unlocking it. You don't have to prove anything, I said as we stood near the field. I'm not trying to, he replied. I just don't want to mess it up. I crouched to his level. You've already won more than you know. Today's just fun. The hard part's behind you. He nodded, then ran out onto the field. He didn't score, but he caught the pass that sealed the game. Crowd cheered. His teammates mobbed him. One even lifted him up like a champ. And in the stands, I didn't film it. I just watched. Because sometimes you don't need to capture the moment. You just need to live it. On the way home, Darren rolled down the window and let the air whip through his hair. "I think I'm done being scared," he said. I smiled. "Then you're just getting started." There's a photo frame in the hallway now. Blackwood. Clean glass. Inside, 2 photos. One of me and my unit overseas. Dusty, grinning, armor-clad. And one of Darren, post-game, cleats muddy, hands in the air. Above it, a simple engraved word. Legacy. I didn't hang it for show. I hung it so we'd never forget what came before this piece. Some nights, I still wake up and check the door locks twice. Old habits. Some days, I still brace when I hear sudden yelling outside. But now, I don't let it rule me. And Darren? He sleeps with his door cracked. His music low. His laugh louder. He's growing into his own man now. And me? I finally know who I am without the war. Not just a survivor. Not just a father. A builder. Of trust. Of strength. Of a life that couldn't be taken away, only earned. The air was cold that morning. Sharp, clean. The kind of cold that wakes you up whether you like it or not. Veterans Day ceremonies always made me uneasy. I never knew where to stand. On the side with the ones still in uniform, or the side with the ones who left parts of themselves overseas. But this year, Darren asked me to go. "I think it matters," he'd said. "To people. To me." So we went. Small town gathering. Folded flags on folding chairs. A brass bugle that hit the high notes just right. I wore my jacket. Not dress blues, not civvies. Just something in between. Darren stood beside me, hands in his pockets, scanning the crowd. "You think they know?" he whispered. "Know what? What it cost?" I looked at the faces. The quiet ones. The ones smiling too hard. The ones whose eyes never stopped scanning. "Some do," I said. "Some don't. But we don't show up for the ones who already know. We show up for the ones who need to." When they called my name for recognition, I didn't move at first. Then Darren nudged me gently. I stepped forward. The applause wasn't loud, but it was enough. Afterward, he clapped me on the back. "I'm proud of you," he said. I didn't say it out loud. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need medals or speeches. Just that one sentence. From him. There was one letter I never wrote. One I thought about for years but never put to paper. Until now. I sat in the study, window cracked open, evening breeze brushing against my neck as I stared at a blank page. Then I began. "Dear Monroe, you probably knew you wouldn't make it out that day. You still went in first. Still dragged Jacobs even after the sniper cracked the wall. I used to wonder if I deserved to come home. Then I raised a kid who asks questions like, how do I forgive someone who hurt me without letting them back in? And I realized something. Maybe you didn't die to protect a mission. Maybe you died to protect the chance of someone becoming better than us. I'm not perfect, but I've raised a boy who's kind, honest, and smarter than I ever was. And that might be the best thing I'll ever do. So thank you for covering me. I promise I'm doing something with the time." I folded it, tucked it into an envelope, and slid it into the box of keepsakes under my desk. Not for mailing, for remembering. Darren came in an hour later, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I thought you might be cold," he said, handing me one. I smiled, nodded. He glanced at the envelope, but didn't ask. And that's when I realized. He didn't need to know everything I carried. He just needed to know I was still here, and that I always would be. It was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that doesn't just fill a room, it settles in it. Like dust. Like memory. Darren sat beside me on the porch swing, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, legs pulled up like he used to when he was 10. We didn't speak for a while. The wind carried a few dry leaves across the porch floor. Then he asked it, not casually, but carefully. "Do you think we'll ever stop feeling it? The weight of what happened?" I didn't look at him right away. Instead, I looked out at the dark street, the glow of the porch light brushing against his face like a half-finished painting. "No," I said. "I don't think it goes away." He nodded slowly. "That kinda sucks. It does. But the good part is, we don't have to carry it alone anymore. He was quiet again. Then he whispered, I hated you once. For not fighting louder. I know. I thought maybe if you screamed in court, they'd believe you more. I turned to him. And now, I think the quiet scared them more. He leaned against me, just for a second. I'm proud of us, he said. I closed my eyes. So was I? Not because we were perfect, but because we never gave up when it would have been easier to just walk away. The envelope sat in the mail pile for 3 days before I opened it. Military-grade seal. Official government header. Inside, a letter. Formal. Clean. We are pleased to inform you that your original command and mental clearance record has been fully restored to active status, free of contestation or reservation. You remain, as you were, a trusted asset of the U.S. Armed Forces and a record of integrity. At the bottom, a familiar signature. Judge Harlan Knox. I held the paper in my hands, fingers still. Not shaking. Just steady. The irony? I didn't need it anymore. I had already proven everything, not in a uniform, but in a courtroom, a kitchen, a backyard full of laughter and missed football passes. Darren walked in as I folded it. What's that? Just something I used to think mattered more than it does. He grinned. You gonna hang it? No, I said. I'm gonna file it under things I already knew. That night, he left his door wide open. And I stood in the hallway, watching the soft glow of his night lamp fade as he drifted off. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about becoming the man my son believed I was, long before the court ever did. And now, for everyone watching this, what's the one fight you almost gave up on, but didn't? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this hit you in the heart, if it reminded you that truth whispers louder than lies ever could, then like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. Not just for more stories like this, but because some battles deserve to be remembered. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. See you in the next one. Stay standing. Stay true. The story never ends.